Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we're going to have a discussion on a specific situation that is rapidly evolving in the NBA as we currently speak. My co-host here, Austin, does not even know what that is quite yet. We're going to be jumping into that. Before we talk about that in today's video, though, go ahead, leave a like. Also, hit that subscribe button if you are new to Utility Sports. It would mean a lot to have your guys' support. So let's go ahead here and jump into it with some drama and disagreement here, Austin. You might be able to start narrowing down what we could be talking about today. And if you did guess Ben Simmons, that would be correct, because you and I have a little bit of disagreement when it comes to this topic. And I think it's something fun that you and I could actually talk about here, because you and I usually tend to agree a little bit more often than not when it comes to some of the content here. So I think Ben Simmons is something we disagree on. And I think that's a perfect segue into kind of what the general public thinks about Ben Simmons as a whole right now, because there's a lot of divide on his situation with Philadelphia. And I think a lot of people tend to agree with you, and then there's a smaller amount of people that agree with me, which is really fun because we get to kind of represent those two side points. So Austin, I know you're a little bit more skeptical of Ben Simmons, his situation right now with Philadelphia, the fact that he's holding out of camp, and the fact that he won't talk to any of his teammates. Give me your thoughts on that. Break down why you feel the way you do about Ben Simmons, and really give the audience kind of a feel on your perspective on the situation.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic. Reason being, we know that he was out in LA. We know that all of his teammates wanted to talk to him about potentially rejoining the 76ers, really getting the season going on a more positive note, because there's a lot of negative energy in that building. As you know, when a star player holds out, it really affects the organization from top to bottom. You have to completely alter what your game plan is going into next season. And that's where it really starts there. For being on a personal level, I think that Ben Simmons owes it to his teammates to maybe explain a little bit further, the reason why he's holding out. Obviously, he wants to get out, but I think he should owe it to his teammates to talk to him about some of the reasons, some of the things that are really bothering him. And also, like, the team just wants to know what's going on. Maybe on a more personal level, they really care about, are you okay? Mentally, is everything good with you? Maybe that's just a conversation. I understand kind of the perspective of maybe he doesn't want to talk about all that basketball stuff with his teammates, and maybe he doesn't even have the heart to tell them, to their faces. Yes, he can go out and have Rich Paul, throw out all these different things about him, wanting him to be traded. He wants Tyrese Maxey out of there too, who also is represented by Rich Paul. So I think that's just creating a lot of unnecessary drama. Maybe he could be able to smooth that out himself, maybe to make the transition a little easier. I think part of it is his teammates would not be, they would not go easy on him. They would really want to push him to stay. And those are some tough conversations to have. But if you're a star, and sometimes as a human, you have to take that head on and really take accountability.
Right. I think this is one of the biggest and most evident examples of workplace dysfunction that we've seen in the NBA, probably during our lifetimes, to be completely honest. The 76ers are going through a time period here that's unprecedented. They owed Ben Simmons $8.2 million based on his contract due dates for when he's supposed to get paid. It's the second group percentage of his contract. He gets his contract in 4 increments. So his percentage of 26 to 50% was due this past week when he reported to training camp. Of course, he did not report. And the 76ers became the first team ever to not pay out a contract portion of that extent, which is unprecedented, like I said, and really creates a lot of drama there between the organization and Ben Simmons himself. And this has been something that has been, coming down the turnpike for quite some time. There's been a ton of drama between him and Joel Embiid. Do they like to play together? Are the 76ers going to win with the two of them? And also then the organization as well, I feel, has kind of turned on Ben Simmons, which is where me and Austin kind of find the different viewpoint. I think Austin looks at it from the contractual standpoint of, hey, Ben Simmons signed a contract, belongs on the team here at this point because he's, committed himself as an employee of the organization in a way. And you're completely right there, Austin, as well. He does owe that to the organization technically. Whereas I'm looking at it from a perspective, I think that's a little bit different from the way that the organization has treated him as a player. And I don't blame him at all. I'm coming from the perspective where I don't blame Ben Simmons for not wanting to report to camp, which is really rare for me because usually I'm kind of on that same side as Austin there, where I'm looking at this and saying, if I was Ben Simmons, I wouldn't show up. And this specifically goes to Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid, how they handled the exit interviews, how they handled the press conferences following the loss to the Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference semifinals, where when asked about Ben Simmons, Doc Rivers said, "I don't know if Ben Simmons can be a starting point guard on a championship team," which is really the opposite of what he had been saying all year, and really takes a vote of confidence away from your head coach. Hearing a head, like that's like essentially in everyday work, that's like hearing your manager at a job say, "Oh, we can't be a successful business with you being a part of our company." Which, I mean, would you want to go back and work for that company as well? But then there's also the side of it too, which I think Austin's also coming from a little bit with, Ben Simmons hasn't improved a lot as a player, especially offensively, hasn't put in the hours to become a shooter yet at this point, at least someone who's going to be willing to take shots in NBA games, and also hasn't improved out of the post at all. Even I think he's regressed in some areas coming out of the post. He looked really good at LSU early in his career. He was hitting a couple of fadeaways into the short corner area, and now he's not doing that. So there's definitely some structural divide between these two sides, where you have the organization, the 76ers, who aren't showing any respect to Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid has been very blatant in his comments about Ben Simmons during media week this past week as training camps opened up as well. And Ben Simmons, on the other hand, is really flaky towards the organization right now, has made it clear he does not want to play another game for that team. He's been liking stuff on Twitter. And I think it is a bad look for both, but I'm coming from the side where I understand Ben Simmons' perspective on things. Austin, given that Ben Simmons didn't get his second portion of his paycheck, do you think that there's a chance Ben Simmons returns this year, or do you think he's holding out for good with his activity on Twitter and Instagram?
Yeah, it's really hard to know that at this point. I don't think he's going to report to Philadelphia. I think they're going to have to just get a deal done. But more of my issue lies not with him and the divide from the actual organization themselves, but it's more of him with his actual teammates. I understand the frustration with Doc Rivers. I get that. Joel Embiid, I understand the frustrations with him as an individual. Obviously not the best guy in terms of phrasing things to the media. And, he definitely rubs people the wrong way. I think we see that on court, off court, everywhere he is, he likes to stir it up a little bit. But I have more of an issue with all of the other teammates that he's ignoring. I mean, these are your brothers. These are the guys you played with for years. And it's kind of like a family, really. And you're just disowning them. You're really not even giving them a chance just to talk to you. Maybe they're looking at it from a personal side rather than a business side. Obviously, both would be brought up in said conversations, but that's more of where it lies for me. I understand his frustration with the team. I understand the team's frustration with him. I get it. There's a bad dynamic between the two, but I have issues with him just not reaching out to his team or not really talking to his team, period. So I think that's probably where the biggest discrepancy is for me.
One question I have for you, Austin, which I'm struggling myself to figure out how I kind of feel about this, and I don't think it's something that anyone's really talking about. Do you think Ben Simmons' current actions, his inability to contact his teammates, his unwillingness to be in contact with the organization, with essentially his bosses, do you think that is negatively impacting how other GMs and executives around the league are looking at him, not only as just a player, but as an individual?
So first, I actually want to start on the part of him not doing these things. I actually think part of this is maybe not entirely on him. I think part of it's coming from Rich Paul and that crew. I mean, I think that they're sending the message, hey, don't talk to them at all. Maybe it's just easier to work your way out of there if you don't have those relationships and that kind of stuff. So you don't have these second thoughts because you basically fully committed yourself to leaving this organization. And this is the pathway you want to do it, whether it's right or wrong. So I think that is where some of that might be motivated from. I also think in the stance of, is this affecting him around the league? Yes, of course, I think it does. But I don't know that, with so much negative media all the time, I don't think it really affects these GMs on a day-to-day basis. But I think there is, an overall downturn in how people view him as a person and maybe even player.
Right. That's kind of how I had felt about it too, because I look at it as, can he be an all-in guy? Can he be someone that, hey, when the going gets tough with our new team, assuming you're a team that trades for him, what happens if you lose 3 out of 4 games on a road trip? What happens, if a local media member writes a negative article about him? Is he going to fall off the boat? Is he going to cause problems? Is he going to ask out? Is he going to force his way out? And that's really the key point you brought here too. How much of this is Ben Simmons? How much of this is Rich Paul? I think those two are having an interesting dynamic right now. I think Rich Paul is no good news for teams when one of their star players hires him. He's the best best agent in the league when it comes to getting his players out of situations. That's why I have concerns about Zach LaVine recently hiring him. And I think that there's going to be serious ramifications for the 76ers with this as well. I think it's hurting their potential return on investment here, because not only did Ben Simmons' trade value fall during the playoffs here, where he looked bad against Atlanta. Let's not sugarcoat it. He did not play his best basketball that final series. The issue now is he can't come back. He's not going to come back and restore his trade value at all. The most recent footage of basketball we're going to see from Ben Simmons is probably his worst basketball he's played in his pro career, which is not going to help his trade value. It's going to really handcuff Philadelphia, who has championship aspirations. And I think this is going to get even messier as the year goes on. I think the Philadelphia 76ers are not going to pay him any more money the rest of the season. I don't think Ben Simmons will play a game this year with the Philadelphia 76ers. And I believe that last game that he played, where he passed up the open dunk, passed it to Matisse Thybulle, and went 1 for 2 on free throws, that's going to be the last game we had ever seen Ben Simmons play with the Philadelphia 76ers. It's a nasty situation, which brings me to the next point here. We talked about a little bit of the viewpoints already, but I want to talk about this thing that I'm terming and coining as the Robin effect, which I think is something that has become a byproduct of the way that NBA narratives have been formed by the media and by fans specifically. And I think it has a really, really negative impact on actually basketball itself, the way that people look at the game, and really kind of the casual aspect of basketball here. And Austin, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. When the Dallas Mavericks got bounced in the playoffs, who got blamed? Luka Doncic or Kristaps Porzingis?
Kristaps got blamed, for sure.
When it comes down to it, who gets blamed in Philadelphia, Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons?
Ben Simmons.
When you look at Portland, everyone says you're good enough to win with Dame. CJ McCollum's the guy whose name comes up in trade discussions. When the Miami Heat lost in 2014, well, Dwayne Wade wasn't Dwayne Wade anymore. This has been an issue, and the NBA media causes this, where you can have a guy who's a top 35 player in the world, and he's not good enough to be your number 2, regardless of how he performs. Like Ben Simmons, I don't know what people expect from him. He's never been a 20-point per game scorer. Looking at the tape coming from LSU, he was never going to be that. Everyone should have been aware of this. And yet all the blame usually gets assigned to the number 2 player on a team, because there's no way that the fans of that organization are ever going to put the blame on the best player. And honestly, a lot of the coverage in the NBA right now is not deep enough to actually talk about style and scheme. When you talk about, assigning blame and reasons why a team doesn't win, the media right now, mainstream media specifically, and also very vocal fans on Twitter, don't know enough about basketball to talk about why, getting a lower post entry or having different off-ball movement, off-ball screens, different motion style offenses, different utilization of zone defense at certain key points of games. No one talks about those things anymore when you're talking about why a team won or lost. They talk about, the second best player on the team didn't do what he was supposed to do. It's just a really casual thing to me. I think it's been happening for a while now, and I'm going to call it the Robin effect, because at the end of the day, when something goes wrong, no one's ever going to blame the Batman. They're going to say that Robin didn't do enough, that Robin didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And ultimately, I just don't think that's true at all. We saw how big Chris Middleton was this past year for the Milwaukee Bucks in winning a championship. Middleton's been doing that for a long time in the playoffs. And still, of course, a lot of that blame did go to Giannis, and some of that was deserved, but at the same time, it wasn't. And there's certain things that Mike Budenholzer changed in his system to make things work and win a championship there in Milwaukee, which is really why they went and won a championship this year. It wasn't anything about an individual's performance. It's all about how they get utilized. And I just think that right now the fans and casual media narratives don't really live up to that in a lot of ways. And one other thing I want to talk about with Joel Embiid, the most common thing, Austin, I'm sure you've heard this a ton as well, is that Ben Simmons hasn't improved since he came into the NBA at all. That's a pretty general stereotype about Ben Simmons. And in some ways it's true. It's accurate, I think, in some ways. I want to talk about Joel Embiid, Austin. I want you to kind of give your thoughts on this as well. Where has he improved as a player in the last 4 or 5 years, because every time that Philadelphia 76ers basketball gets brought up, it's, well, what if Ben Simmons could shoot a 3-ball and space for Joel Embiid? To me, Joel Embiid can shoot the 3-ball. He shot 37% from 3 this year. How come he's trending downwards in his attempts per game from 3? I want to know what your thoughts are on that first, Austin, the 3-point attempts per game.
I mean, part of it comes down to the coaching change as well. I mean, there was just a different expectation from Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers did not do a very good job, especially when it came to postseason play. I think we're all very well aware of that. His inability to make adjustments on the fly, that really what hindered him with the LA Clippers, and that's why he was fired. And the same applied this season, his unwillingness to change his style basically from the regular season into the postseason and on a series-to-series basis. It all remained the same. The game plan's always the same with him. And talking about Joel Embiid, yes, he should be expected to be the shooter on this team between the two of them. Ben Simmons can't shoot the way it is. Joel Embiid has proven that he can shoot. He's got a shot that he can make. But like you said, I mean, in terms of where is he improved, the 3-point attempts are down. That's part of a systematic issue. So not necessarily on him entirely. Some of that comes down to decision making when he gets passed to in the corner. And like you said, the last 2 seasons, career low in blocks. I think part of that, really him having to carry the load offensively. I think his post game has definitely improved. I mean, year after year, he seemingly gets better after watching his footwork and his ability to really finish around the rim. It's really impressive. That's why he's one of the top players in the league. Is his post game is terrific, but also, like the over 3 turnovers game every single season. In terms of as a whole, I mean, he has not improved as a playmaker. He needs to shoot the 3-ball more, but none of this blame, like you said, this kind of goes back to the Robin Hood effect, will be put on him because he was the best player. He was an MVP candidate, but there's definitely some areas that he needs to get better at. If you're the best player on a team, you have to get better, and the criticism will not be on him until Ben Simmons is gone. And, really if it's just, I mean, we look at Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns, the blame's never been on him. Yes, he is their best player, but none of the blame's been put on him, even though he's actually a defensive liability, which people don't want to hear that, but he is. Once again, it comes down to those media narratives. But that's a great example of, him not getting any of the blame despite the team being awful every single year. There's areas of his game where he has to improve as well. So great point on Joel Embiid. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Right, and the one thing too, one quick thing, because I don't want anyone to misconstrue kind of my point here. Joel Embiid is a better player than Ben Simmons, and I'm not suggesting that he isn't. I'm not suggesting that Joel Embiid is the reason for their failures. I think the reason for their failures is a vast collection of decision-making over a long course of time. Partially, let's look at Elton Brand and Daryl Morey, bringing in a head coach in Doc Rivers, who historically, throughout the last 15 years of his coaching career, has been known to be unable or incapable of making schematic changes throughout playoff series. Atlanta took advantage of that. Nate McMillan's just, quite frankly, a better coach than Doc Rivers, and he was out there as a free agent coach at the same time Doc Rivers was. That was a mistake. You can't, and Brett Brown was a mistake letting him stay there. That's specifically Elton Brand, who, of course, Daryl Morey's more new to the situation. That's a hiring mistake. That when you have 2 players who are as volatile as Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons together, who aren't a natural fit, bringing in a coach who can't adjust his scheme game to game probably isn't the right decision. Then also looking at other draft moves that they made and other trade moves. They gave up a ton of assets and a ton of picks in a deal for Tobias Harris, who, let's be honest with it, Tobias Harris is not good enough to be your number 2 scorer on a championship team. And by the time that they made that trade, they knew full well that Ben Simmons wasn't a number 2 scoring option. He's a number 2 player on a team, but not a number 2 scoring option, just like how in Utah, Rudy Gobert is not going to score more than 13 points a game ever in his career, right? Then you also look at the decision to max out Tobias Harris in free agency and not max out Jimmy Butler in free agency. That was another missed decision. There's a whole bunch of collection of decisions here by the Philadelphia 76ers brass and decision makers that have led them down this path where they don't get to where they want to be. This is a team that's never made the Eastern Conference Finals during Joel Embiid's career. That is a disgrace. They've also made decisions to trade away the guys who could space the floor, like Landry Shamet, and keep guys like Matisse Thybulle, who have no offensive game, on their roster. I love Matisse Thybulle, by the way. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA, but he can't coexist next to Ben Simmons. That's problematic when you're actually trying to construct a roster, and then trading away Landry Shamet in a deal is just a bad move. They've been very careless with their draft picks in the history, especially recent history, and they make bad decisions when they've had them. Tyrese Maxey's looking like one of the few hits that they've had recently. Don't forget that they traded away Mikal Bridges in order to get Zaire Smith and a future pick that they ended up trading away later anyway in the Tobias Harris deal. They've made a whole collection of decisions. Head coaching's been poor, in my opinion. Joel Embiid hasn't improved his game around what Ben Simmons' strengths and weaknesses are. And yet the common narrative is, oh, Ben Simmons hasn't improved. There's a bunch of other things that go into it. Is part of the issue on Ben Simmons? Yes, for sure. I think he is a part of the problem. However, right now, all of Philly media has blamed him. Every single fan in Philadelphia hates Ben Simmons at this point. And I understand not liking a guy because he's sitting out. But there's a difference between not liking him and also blaming every single postseason failure on one player. When it comes down to it, Joel Embiid needs to be healthy. The head coaching needs to be better. Doc Rivers needs to start making adjustments. And Elton Brand and Daryl Morey have to do a better job in their decision-making. The fact that Tyrese Maxey became untouchable in James Harden trade negotiations is unacceptable if you're trying to win a championship. And at this point, honestly, I'm just kind of really tired of the Ben Simmons media narrative. Specifically, that's the whole point of this video for me. Austin, any other closing thoughts here before we wrap up this video?
Oh, I think it's a very, very good point. Ben Simmons does not get enough, Ben Simmons gets too much of the blame, and the playoff failures, it's all pointed to him. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it was an error in building this roster. They did not have the right components to fit Ben Simmons' skill set and Joel Embiid's skill set. Therefore, really leading down the path of, I guess, mediocrity in terms of where they should have been. So that's the big issue, and I think that Philadelphia management deserves more of the blame.
Right, I think so as well. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, leave a like, hit that subscribe button. Also, comment below where you think Ben Simmons should get traded. Like I said, I don't think he'll play another game in Philadelphia, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on where the three-time All-Star could possibly land this season yet at some point. Hopefully you enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys in the very next video.